Welcome back, Archer athletes. Today's training session theme revolves around the dynamic movements that are required for you to perform setup and achieve skeletal alignment efficiently. Now, many of the training videos I make for you apply to both compound and recurve. Today's training session is going to be specific to recurve athletes, Olympic or bare bow. I have 4 goals for you today. Number 1, fluidly move through the 4 phases of setup. 2, establish skeletal alignment, also known as barrel of the gun, by coiling around the spine. 3, progressively build back tension from set through setup. Now, I know back tension continues to build all the way through follow through, but we're focused today on setup. Finally, the last goal, be able to articulate the 2 primary goals of setup by the end of today's session. And I'll give you a hint by telling you what they are right now. The first goal of setup is raising the bow, and the second goal of setup is establishing skeletal alignment, also known as barrel of the gun. Software that you'll need to employ today to be successful with the training session: breathing, intensity control, rhythm, and attention and focus. The breathing is going to be particularly important because that is going to help you establish the proper posture, and it's that posture from which the dynamic movements of setup then build from. Today's training progression assumes you are already using an open stance and are establishing proper posture in set position. In addition, although I've chosen to focus on coiling down, it's important that you know that coiling down is not the only way to achieve skeletal alignment, barrel of the gun, during setup. You can also coil while you're raising the bow. That's called coiling up. You can even combine coiling up with coiling down to form a hybrid of the 2. Any combination is fine. You simply must achieve skeletal alignment, barrel of the gun, by the end of setup, while also continuing to maintain hook, grip, posture, and draw side elbow inside the arrow line, to name a few. Today we're going to start out with some general information about setup. From there, I'll move on to giving you a detailed description of the different movement patterns within setup. I will make sure to show you lots of demonstrations today. I have 3 warm-ups. After the warm-ups, we have a 2-part main set that is filled with cues specifically for the dynamic movements of setup. Finally, we'll close the day with some debrief questions to help you solidify your learning. For recurve, setup is perhaps the most dynamic movement of the shot cycle. Setup involves the raising of the bow and the rotation of the torso around the spine above a stable base of unwavering hips and legs. Now, the rotation of that torso is accompanied by migrating the draw side scapula as close to the spine as possible to build a back tension and achieve our goal of establishing skeletal alignment, barrel of the gun. Barrel of the gun is a straight line connected by 3 points. So the bow side wrist, the bow side shoulder, and the draw side shoulder. Let's talk about scapular movement during setup. The scapula wants to move as close as possible to the spine during the coiling of setup. Here's the scapula, here's the spine. We want the lower inside corner of that scapula to migrate over and get as close to the spine as possible. It will actually be winging out. See that? My hand isn't touching the pen. Then when we draw, the scapula will continue to move, but very little and in a very different way. The scapula during draw really should flatten out then against the spine like so. Okay? So here we have the scapular depression during setup, and then we have during draw, back tension continues to increase, and that's where the scapula is going to flatten out against the back, against the spine. Setup is also the step of the shot cycle that does the most work to the bow. Notice how far apart my hook hand and grip hand are at this very moment, okay? Let's assign them a number. Let's say that they're 11 inches apart. Well, as soon as I start driving the dot, you see how they get a little bit farther apart. You see a little bit of stretch come into that stretch band. That's what we want. Now, as I begin raising the drawbridge, right, that distance between the two hands continues to increase, especially because my hook hand is going straight up like an elevator. Now, at no point in time does the stretch band begin to get shorter, all right? So I've come up here to my highest point, and now I'm going to coil down, okay? And look, the stretch band gets even longer, all right? So there I am now. I haven't drawn with a capital D, as in one of the steps of the shot cycle. I haven't drawn the bow at all, but I've done a heck of a lot of work to the bow. Draw would be the next phase of the shot cycle. The rotation of the core opens up the bow a tremendous amount. We do the most amount of work to the bow in the setup phase of the shot cycle. In order to perform the dynamic movements of setup competently and successfully, you need to begin setup from the proper position. And the proper position or posture to begin setup is set position. Check out my videos on draw side elbow, hollow back 1, hollow back 2 for more information on posture. But for now, here's a quick review of posture using some new language I've developed. I hope you enjoy it. Tuck, shorten, drive, and shift. Let me explain. Tuck. I want you to tuck the pelvis under your core to engage your glutes as if hiding a tail between your legs. Shorten. Shorten the distance between from your chest and shoulders to the ground. Shorten that distance. All right? Drive. Drive the pressure point of your hand through the pressure point of the bow to start getting connected with the bow and energize and stiffen your bow arm. Shift. Shift your hook hand away from your torso in order to find your draw side elbow inside the arrow line. Those of you who have watched other videos, I also call this opening the window because there's a window that opens between the string and the bow limbs. Tuck, shorten, drive, and shift. Those are the 4 cues you can be thinking about in posture in order to make sure you're in the proper position, a strong position to initiate the movements for setup. Now that I've defined the starting point for setup, let's break down the actual execution of setup into 4 phases: posture, the raising of the bow, transition, and coiling down. The posture phase is first. It's critical that you establish core alignment and use that deep inhale and exhale during set position to establish that core alignment. Now, as you raise the bow and later coil, it may feel natural for you to allow the chest to rise and the tension around the hips to release and soften. So we want to keep your chest to the ground and tuck the tail to manage the tension in the glutes and core, making it so that your chest stays down and back stays flat and core remains engaged throughout the entire shot. Raising the bow phase is next, and it's going to involve an inhalation. There's a bow side and a draw side that I'm going to cover. So let's cover the bow side. On the bow side, keep the bow vertical and drive through the pressure point towards the target as you raise the bow wrist just above shoulder height. Keep your shoulders low and level, and remember that the window will stay open, forcing your elbow inside the arrow line. Now on the draw side arm wants to float towards the sky, remaining parallel with the ground, as if you wanted to balance a teacup on the draw side elbow. Manage the buildup of pressure in the hook and draw side of the body so that the hook can travel a vertical path like an elevator to its highest point just above the bow shoulder. The transition phase is not only a transition from the raising of the bow to the coiling down, but also the inhale that takes place while you're raising the bow to the exhale that takes place while you're coiling down. Now, the transition phase takes place right at the highest point of your raise. So here we have the raise, and the transition would be right in here. And as you get to the top, that highest point of the raise, I want you to be slowing down as if there was a giant coil spring hanging from the ceiling and it's pushing into your bow side wrist. As you come up, You push in and compress that coil spring, and as it decompresses, it sends you back down and gets you ready to go into the next phase, coiling down with focused strength and power. During coil down, make sure you're exhaling. Maintain the tension of posture while simultaneously rotating your core around the axis of the spine and driving the bow towards the target through your pressure point. The top of your hook hand will end up at shoulder height with your palm facing the pocket of your shoulder. While your hips will remain in the original open orientation to the target, your sternum will now be facing down the shooting line, and people should be able to see the fabric on your shirt twisting around your body. Continue to rotate until the top of your draw side shoulder is in line with your bow shoulder and bow wrist. As you develop the ability to choreograph these movements, simultaneously plow the draw side scapula as close to the spine as possible. First, move your feet about shoulder width apart and tuck your hips under to engage your glutes. Engage your abs and maintain a neutral spine. Keep your chin tucked and elbows locked for all of these progressions. Rather than slide your scapula directly towards your spine, try moving it down and towards the spine during the retraction. This is also called a depression. For the protraction, feel the shoulder blade move away as far from your spine as possible. Go slowly, a little bit more slowly than you see here, and do 12 reps of each step in the progression, or stop at whatever step is your maximum ability. The first progression we'll go through is this standing progression of protraction and retraction. The second step will be getting onto our hands and knees and then doing the protraction and retraction. Finally, a push-up position or a plank position, and tuck your hips under to engage your glutes. Engage your abs and maintain a neutral spine. Keep your chin tucked and elbows locked for all of these progressions. And then one arm protractions and retractions, if you can. Warm-up number 2 is a shoulder mobility warm-up using a bar. Hold the bar in front of you, pulling out on the bar like you're trying to extend it. Keep soft knees, tuck your hips under, and keep a flat back, no hollow back. Engage your core. Raise the bar up, pulling it out, and then bring one bicep to one ear and your other bicep to the other. Continue to pull the bar apart and raise it above your head before bringing your elbows straight down to the ground. Make sure not to flare them out. Keep pulling the bar out and pull the bar down as well, like you're trying to bend it. Hold that scapular depression, feel the stretch. Raise the bar up and then twist, like you're coiling in archery. Twist one way, then twist the other. Keeping the glutes and quads engaged, keeping the core engaged. When you lower the bar like this, push the bar together instead of pulling it apart. Then repeat that cycle. Begin pulling the bar apart, raise it, bicep to ear, bicep to ear. Continue pulling the bar apart, keep the hips tucked and the core engaged. Now drop the elbows down towards the ground without flaring them out behind you. Hold the scapular depression, raise it back up, still pulling the bar apart, and do your twists. Keep those hips steady. That side was a little bit better on me. The banded twist. Attach a long stretch band to an anchor point at about shoulder height. Adopt the same stance you would for archery. Open stance with inside of heels plumb with outside of shoulders. Make sure to tilt your pelvis and engage the glutes. Stand at a distance away from the band's anchor point that there's an optimal amount of tension, starting tension, on the band for you. Raise the draw side arm as if it was following the bow arm up during the raising of the bow. Now coil around your spine with your torso and hold that position for 5 seconds before relaxing down and repeating. This is an excellent warm-up that builds strength in the larger core muscles needed to do the work to the bow when establishing barrel of the gun. Make sure you really squeeze your glutes because you don't want your hips rotating with your torso. Perform 8 reps per side, take a 30-second break, and then perform 8 more reps per side. Today's main set has 2 different parts. The first part consists of 4 5-minute intervals. You will engage in 5 minutes of focus using a stretch band or lightweight training bow for each of the 4 phases of setup: posture, raising the bow, transition, and coiling down. I will provide you with a series of cues for each one of those phases, and you get to choose which cue or cues you want to focus on while executing the movements. For those of you who are not familiar with 5 minutes of focus, this is a time where you engage in deep practice. Slow down your movements, take time to focus, and imprint what the correct movements feel like. Use a timer to keep you moving through this progression. Part 1 of today's main set requires that you go get a long mirror, a stretch band, or a lightweight training bow. Posture will be the highlight of the first 5 minutes of focus. I have 4 cues for you to work on during posture in this 5 minutes of focus. So in the other phases of setup, raising the bow, transition, coiling down, I want you just focus on 1 cue. But posture, we can take the time to really hit all the cues to make sure that we're set before we move on. So first cue is drive through the dots. Drive the dots. So I want you to put a piece of tape, a small piece of tape on the pressure point of your hand, put a corresponding piece of tape on the pressure point of your grip. In set position, while you're establishing your posture, drive through the dots, all right? Make sure you're connected there. Drive through the dots. Second cue, tuck the tail. I want you to tuck the tail underneath like this until you feel the glutes engage firmly, and you're going to maintain that tension throughout the rest of the shot. Third cue, chest to ground. You can place a piece of tape right here in the center of your chest, put another one on the ground. Shorten that distance between the 2, all right? I want those 2 distances, imagine they're tied together, or maybe that they're magnetized, super strong rare earth magnets, and you're pulled down like this, chest to ground. The final cue is the open the window. The open the window deals with the hook hand, and I want your hook hand to shift out away, and of course that opens the window with the limb and the string so you can see down between those 2 to the target, okay? Open the window. So we have drive through the dots, tuck the tail, chest to ground, and open the window. Those are the 4 cues I want you to focus on during these first 5 minutes of focus right now. Go ahead, set a timer, get started. The raising the bow phase is the highlight of the second 5 minutes of focus. I have 5 cues that I'm going to lay out for you, and each one's going to be offer a different focal point for you, revolving around the raising of the bow. So choose which one is going to be most appropriate for you and help you improve the most with this phase of setup. So first cue is drive the drawbridge. Now this is a great cue for anyone that's having trouble keeping the bow shoulder down or not really energizing the bow arm. Drive the drawbridge. Imagine your bow as your bow arm as a drawbridge, and it has the energy of a truck that's driving down that drawbridge as it is raising. Okay, so I want your drawbridge to raise, right? Super strong and connected like the steel of a drawbridge, and it's got the energy headed that way of a big truck that's trying to maybe jump over the drawbridge to make it to the other side. Okay, so we've got drive the drawbridge, keeps the shoulder down, keeps your arm energized. 2, reach and raise. That's short and simple, but I have some athletes that really like that one. Reach and raise. So both of those cues, very similar, but you might connect with one more than the other. The third cue is going to be scan the barcode. With the barcode scanner cue, we have a piece of tape on my hand that says scanner, and you could just use the finger tab as the scanner. You don't have to put a piece of tape that says scanner on your hand. Then you have a barcode here right in the pocket of the shoulder, and I'm going to make sure that my scanner passes over that barcode, not close to it in this dimension, right? Because then our elbow is going to go outside the arrow line. We need to keep the window open during the entire phase of setup. So the hand's going to need to be out away from the barcode, but passing in front of it. So just to be clear. Now, here we go. Set position, find your posture. All right, that's where we tuck at the tail, chest to the ground, drive the dots, and open the window. Now we drawbridge. And while we're drawbridging, we should hear the beep, beep. All right, we should have the barcode scanner pass over the barcode. Here we go. Beep, beep. Cue number 4, elevator. Again, very helpful for someone that's trying to focus on the hook hand traveling straight up. I want your hook hand to travel like an elevator, straight up. Cue number 5, balance a teacup. This is one that I need to work on pretty much all the time. Imagine a teacup right here towards the elbow of your drawing arm. And we want that teacup to remain level. We don't want to spill the tea. So as we raise the bow, we want this to remain level with the ground. We do this, teacup drops, we end up with broken glass and tea everywhere. The transition phase of setup is the highlight of our third 5 minutes of focus. I have 2 cues for you. Number 1, compress the spring. So what is that cue about? Picture a coil spring hanging down from a low ceiling, and as you raise your bow arm, towards the top of that raise, you're going to contact that spring with your bow wrist and compress the spring. That compression is going to give you some tension. You can feel it. You can push into that spring. It's going to slow you down a bit, and then it's going to recoil and send you back down, give you energy for coiling down. So compress the spring is one cue. Another cue is turn the corner. So as you reach the top, I want you to picture yourself turning the corner to begin the coiling down. So I come up to the top and I turn the corner. All right? So turn the corner or compress the spring. Choose one of those cues and focus on it. Deep practice for 5 minutes. Go ahead, get started. Start your timer. The final 5 minutes of focus allows you to really dial in the coiling down phase of the shot. So I have 3 cues for you, and I want you to choose one of them to focus on for these next 5 minutes. Number 1, slide down the threads, lock the lid. So what is that all about? Slide down the threads and lock the lid. Well, I have a sippy cup here, and I think this sippy cup is an excellent example of coiling down during setup. So here's the sippy cup right here. I want you to get a better close-up of this here. So I want you to picture the bottom of the bottle is the lower body, so from the hips down to the feet. And the upper part is the upper body, the torso, and the straw represents the axis of the spine. So on this side, let's have this be, well, let's actually do this side. Let's say that this is the draw side, and this is the bow side, but I want you to ignore this orange wing for a second. Ignore that, and from this little shoulder that sticks out of the cup, I want you to picture that as the bow arms. The bow arm's coming out this way, and this represents the draw shoulder right here. So here we go. Okay, so here we are in set position. This is the draw side, and I want to move this draw side all the way around until it locks into place. That is barrel of the gun, all right, once we're locked in there. All right, so we need to rotate the upper body around the spine until we lock in at skeletal alignment. As you screw a lid onto a base, the lid is getting drawn down. The threads offer mechanical advantage, and they draw the lid down into position. So technically, this lid starts out high, and as you screw it, it gets drawn downwards. Well, guess what? We're coiling down, right? We're up here, and now we need to slide down the threads to lock the lid, all right? So slide down the threads to lock the lid. The second cue will be hide the tape. So I've put a vertical piece of tape here on my draw side, towards the draw side of my body. The camera, the target, can see the tape, but as I coil down, I want my cue to be hide the tape. Hide the tape from what? Hide the tape from the camera. Hide the tape from the target. All right, so you can see the tape now, and as I coil down, I hide the tape. Hide the tape. The final cue I have for you for focusing on the coiling down action of setup is going to be connect the dots. I have a piece of tape on my bow side wrist, my bow side shoulder, and my draw side shoulder. And the goal of this cue is to connect the dots as a result of locking the lid, as a result of rotating my core around my spine and finding barrel of the gun. So, here we go. Go ahead and choose one of those three cues. Slide down the threads to lock the lid, hide the tape, or connect the dots. And go ahead and get started on your last 5 minutes of focus. Part 2 of the main set involves you shooting arrows at a draw weight that still allows you to perform the proper coiling action of setup. All right? There's going to be 2 different sections of part 2. Number 1, you'll be shooting blank bail 9 meters, 18 arrows. Part 2, you're going to get 2 targets at different distances, and you get to choose the target face on either of those targets. 18 arrows total, all right? Now you're going to use the assessment of get the point for both of those sections. Now if you don't remember from past videos, get the point is an assessment tool I use where you have 2 small bowls. One bowl starts out empty, and the other bowl starts out with a whole bunch of small objects in it. I want you, after every arrow, to ask yourself, did I lock the lid? Did I successfully achieve barrel of the gun? Did I lock the lid, just like on the sippy cup? If you can say yes, then you take a target point, or marble, whatever you have, and you take it from the full bin, and you put it in the empty bin. I want you to be able to say, yes, I locked the lid to 90% of your shots, both in the blank bail at 9 meters, with 18 arrows there, and at the 2 different distances where you're going to shoot a total of 18 arrows. Which cues helped you experience or think about setup in a new way? Describe how setup feels now after having worked through this progression compared to before. We did not have any activities today that encouraged developing rhythm within the movements of setup. Regardless, we did separate setup into 4 distinct movements today. How are all the moving parts flowing together for you? What are the 2 primary goals of setup? Were you inspired to create any cues that work better for you? If so, share those with your coach so that you're using the same language. Thanks for using these videos to help with your training. See you soon.